everyone, and welcome to Room 313. I'm Marzieh Hashemi. Thank you so much for being with us. Well, of course, we have another very special guest who has joined us in our Nasr TV studios today. Happy to welcome Mr. Darnell Stephen Summers, who is a filmmaker as well as an activist from the Anti-War Movement. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, thank you for having me. You know, it's been a pleasure. It has been a pleasure. It is a pleasure. It will remain a pleasure.
Well, welcome to Iran. Understand that this has been your first trip, correct?
Although my daughter has been here before.
Okay.
She has 3 cousins on her mother's side of the family, and their father is Iranian, and they've been here to visit the family. So
okay, so some ties here.
Of course, there are ties.
So tell me, because you've been invited, you were invited for the Horizon Film Festival.
Exactly.
How has your stay been, and how was the festival overall?
Phenomenal. I mean, you know, it almost makes me want to cry, actually, because given the present political situation, you know, it's hard for me to fathom why someone would want to attack this country. The people have been so warm and friendly and receptive. You know, I was at the presidential palace the other day, and, you know, the soldiers were just giving me the high five and, you know, recognizing. Of course, they probably had seen my picture in the paper. And I felt like I would feel if I was at home, you know. And in a sense, I am at home because this is the planet Earth. We all live here together. And it's up to us to promote an atmosphere which is conducive to peace. And there again, I just can't wrap my head around why somebody would want to attack this country, given its historical significance and the role it has played in world history.
Well, I do want to get into that, what you've just mentioned about attacking the country. But before that, I want to talk about, as an American, and you come to Iran, where many probably Americans would say that would be the last place they think that they would want to come to. Let's talk about the reactions of the regular people that you have encountered to you being an American.
Well, it reminds me of, in a certain extent, to a visit I had in Bulgaria. You know, I'm so used to people paying attention to me and having these quick glances that when I was in Bulgaria, the people didn't do it. And to a certain extent, it almost disturbed me. And why aren't you looking at me, you know? And of course, you know, people, you have another look, you know, I've got dreadlocks. But having said that, it's even the situation here, the atmosphere here is friendly and cordial. And I haven't had any problems. You know, but like anywhere else, there could be a problem, but I haven't seen any. And they're like people all over the world, in my estimation.
You just mentioned about there are entities who want to attack this country. I want to get into this a little bit because we know that on a daily basis we're hearing from the Israelis about possibly attacking Iran, and because of its what they say the nuclear issue. Although Iran continues to say it's for nuclear energy or peaceful means. However, we know this is on a daily basis that we hear this.
Right.
I want to break this down a little bit. Why, first of all, do you think that the Israelis are continually threatening this country, and yet there does not seem to be any repercussions internationally for what they're doing?
I mean, there has to be the boogeyman. There has to be the enemy for them. You know, I don't go out of my house looking for the enemy, you know. But I think there's certain interests here. You know, in my estimation, in my analysis, we'd have to go all the way back to, you know, just after the Second World War. You know, this area is a vital area full of raw materials, and the history shows us that, you know, they have supported regimes that have oppressed their people, all for the purpose of extracting the raw materials, you know. And after the Second World War, where would the people who had been persecuted and killed and murdered in Europe, there was a question of where they would settle. Given the fact that historically, if we go back to the 19th century, the Zionist movement had its birth. And coupled with that and the opportunity because Palestine was a colony of the British, and they were having problems with the Arab population to bring the Jewish survivors, persecution to that area, served a purpose to establish a beachhead, if you will, And it's strange that you would have people who were victims of the Warsaw Ghetto come to another country and actually do the same thing that was done to them. That's remarkable in and of itself, without any kind of consideration of that fact. So I think that I know that the establishment of the state of Israel was seen as a beachhead, have the interests of the United States represented and the Western world represented in the most crass and brutal way.
Okay, but now when we look at exactly what they're doing, and many say that they are really willing to do this at any time, possibly attacking Iran. I want to talk about the lack of international reaction. When the Israelis say this, that they may attack, nothing is done, nothing is said. And of course, not only when they say, we saw what they did in Gaza and what they do on a regular basis, and mum is the word. What has to happen? What has to happen that across the board that we become more vocal against oppression or war that is inflicted upon anyone?
I mean, by virtue of the fact that we're sitting here right now discussing that something's going on, we see the bulwark of the support for the Zionist state of Israel. And I make a distinction between people who practice Judaism and people who are intent upon imposing Zionism on that particular area. We see that crumbling. And it's crumbling because people are beginning, the news media, the instantaneous news, the vividness of the coverage allows people to get a firsthand view of things. I mean, our knowledge, our access to information is increasing, at a daily rate, and at a speed that boggles the imagination. So people, a friend of mine used to say in the 60s, quantitative experience results in qualitative change. So that's just a law of the universe, and you have your experiences, you see what's going on, and plus all of that coupled with the economic turn down, the economic deterioration and the collapse and the political collapse and the rising up of people all over the world is an inducement to understand and critically understand what's going on. But I'd have to say that this is nothing new. Same thing happened after the war, during the 50s with the ban the bomb movement. People would understand that there was a threat to human survival. We go to the 60s, women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, black liberation, the anti-war movement. These movements swept the planet, because people had raised their consciousness, and it was devoid of the internet and instantaneous, except for television. That was the modem of communication, and radio. Radio had been around since the 20s, as we know it today. So that information, has been compounded. Our human experience has been compounded, and people are just waking up, and it's bound to happen.
Well, you talked about people waking up. I want to look at that aspect of it because, first of all, you are an American who lives in Europe, and I want to look at both these places. Do you think that there is a difference in the European awareness and awakening of what is happening, let's say with the Israelis, and especially with the threat to Iran, more so than an awareness and awakening in North America?
Yes and no. I'd have to say that I'm from Detroit, cosmopolitan center of the world at some point. I like to tell people that it probably was one of the richest cities that the world has ever known. So in that environment... And totally has gone upside down now. Yes, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That gave rise to a lot of information in and of itself, confrontation, the workers' movement. A lot of things were happening. Back to the 60s again, there was the Revolutionary Union movement, DRUM, LRUM, FRUM, Ford Revolutionary Union movement. There were a lot of things going on. So, and then the Black Panther Party, the SDS, and the Grandmothers Knitting Society. All kind of things were going on to raise people's consciousness. So it would be a myth to kind of like assume or state that Americans, somehow different from the rest of the world in terms of. Listen, I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I've been to Vietnam. That'll give you a lesson in geopolitics, if nothing else will, you know. And we all know what contributions veterans have made to the anti-war movement over the years. And I think that what I'm saying is that there's been an attempt, a concerted effort to dumb the American public down. There's a constant bombardment with misinformation, disinformation. That's clear. That's what we've been talking about here. I mean, during the conference, you know, the Zionist influence on the news media, you know, and it's pretty dominant. You see it, you know, if you have eyes to see, and that plays a role. But I have faith in human beings. You know, this is about humanity here, and, you know, but to answer your question again, and very briefly, yes and no. We are aware, some of us, and some of us are not aware. And for those who are aware, it's our responsibility to lead those who are not aware out of darkness, wherever they may be. And
how do we do that? You've just brought up an interesting point. It's our responsibility to lead those out of darkness. How do we do that? Because when we talk about the concentration of the Zionist media, Zionist-controlled media, and how it seems to be having effects globally. So for those who, as you say, are aware or have come out of darkness, how do you have an effect on the others?
You know, I go back to the 19th century, P.T. Barnum. You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. You know, and that applies. You know, people learn from experience. Right now, you know, people are suffering in America. You know, we have not only individuals living on the street, but whole families living on the street. I have a friend of mine who's a veteran now, and I love him dearly. He's like a brother, a son, and he used to sleep with his mother and his younger brother in a car every day. That's why he went to the military, you know, to relieve himself of that situation. Good family man, great father. And if you experience these things, I have a new movie, it's called The Other Americans. And in that movie, I have to deal with the homeless, you know. It's tragic. It's a tragic situation. We have 25% of the world's prison population is in America, 25% of it. And I think we're about 7% of the world's population. But we have 25% of the world's prison population. Now that is 200,000 whites, 600,000 Latinos, and 1.5 million black men. We came to America in chains, and we're still in chains. In fact, Obama came to Berlin, and I was wondering, what could I do, just as an individual, to inform people? So I made up a sign. And on that side, I wrote, you know, the statistics that I just mentioned. But then I anticipated that somebody might ask me about the women. Well, what about the women? So on the back of the sign, I put down the statistics, one statistic. In Germany, there are 80,000 people in prison total, men and women. There are 40,000 black women in prison in America. So I put that down there. So people were coming up to the sign. They were gravitating towards this sign and asking me questions. And then, of course, it happened. Somebody asked me, well, what about the women? Flip. And there it was. You know, because we have to mention all the aspects. So those are terrible statistics. One person, I can't name the person, but he said, you can judge a society by just looking at its prisons. So there's immense oppression historically that continues to go on. There's a deteriorating economic and political situation, the turmoil. In fact, Merlyn Miller, who is a presidential candidate, he caught me a little off guard, and I think it's pretty hard to do. He looked me square in the eyes. He said, Darnell, do you think there's going to be racial war in America? And I had to think about that for a minute. You know, that's how serious, and this guy's a presidential candidate, you know, with the nerve to even pose the question, you know. And
do you think that it's being set up to reach that point, to basically divide the people that causes chaos?
You have this element, and have had this element since slavery. You know, our country is based on slavery. We used to use the word slaveocracy. It kind of like went out of usage. It's not a favorite term anymore. Maybe we can bring it back into play. I told Merlyn that I saw an Eminem concert in Detroit. Mm-hmm. Kids, teenagers, young adults, black, white, Chinese, Indian, whatever color you want. And that was an experience that I didn't have when I was a child. Mm-hmm. You understand me? And it brought tears to my eyes. And to realize that we had come that far, there are people who want to instigate, of course. The possibility of race war in the sense that would have been meant 50 years ago, no. Okay. I think that we have the youth of today, as they say in the common jargon, they're not feeling that. Mm-hmm. They're not feeling that. And they will struggle against that. I think we're strong enough to combat that tendency.
You think the youth of today are aware enough of, let's say, the parties that be, the entities that be, that want to play them against each other and want to use this situation? We've seen the growth and the birth of the Occupy movement in the United States that then moved on to other places. Do you think that the youth of today can be effective in initiating a movement that can actually bring changes to the system there?
I was once young.
We all were.
And I had a dream. I still have that dream, And if I look at somebody like Bradley Manning, he looks like an angel. He's so young, you know what I mean? And he put it all on the line, He did a service for humanity. And if we can have young kids like that, put it all on the line, I think it bodes well for the future. Yes. Okay,
I don't have but a few minutes left, but I want to touch on the military aspect of it, because, of course, you have a military background, and you just talked about Bradley Manley and what he has done. And, of course, for those who may not know, he is an individual who was in the American military,
right.
And as you say, put it all on the line, because the information that he passed on
right.
to WikiLeaks, and of course now has been met with unbelievable oppression, and he's not even talked about in the mainstream media. It's as if they have forgotten about him and moved on. Right. I want to talk about this growing awareness that seems to be taking place of those individuals who are coming from the military background.
Well, they come from a long tradition. I mean, there's stories about resistance in the Continental Army, dating back to George Washington. There's some instances and incidents there of rebellion in the ranks. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and when I was in the service around 1968, I think the Vietnam Veterans Against the War was founded by Vietnam veterans, obviously. And I was still in the service. I hadn't been to Vietnam yet, but I said I'd like to be in that, because I was opposed to the war. In fact, the day before I went, two or 3 days before I went into the military, I was at an AntiWar rally or a demonstration. Now that may seem odd to people, but that was a common occurrence, because by that time there was this groundswell of protest against the war.
And you were drafted. It wasn't.
No, I joined.
Okay, you joined.
I joined, but that's another story.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
We don't have time for that. But so I saw that, and that movement. It just began to grow outside the military and, of course, inside, because it had influenced me. So if it influenced me, it influenced other soldiers. We had many situations of rebellion and mutiny, out-and-out refusal of orders, Hill 89, where the guys refused to go out. And they replaced them, put another unit in there. They heard about the guys before them who preceded them, and they refused to go. I mean, the United States military had essentially disintegrated the discipline. So there was this whole history of resistance to just killing people for nothing, to wars of aggression and exploitation. And that just followed all the way through the years. I've been in the anti-war. Unbelievable. If you would have told me back in 1970, December the 10th, 1970, when I got out of the military, that I would still be in the movement against the war, I would have said, hey, you're crazy. But here I am today. And so that means, and not only, I'm not by myself. And so that whole movement, that whole concept, that whole consciousness has followed us through the decades. And people like Augustina Guayo, Chris Capps, Andre Shepard, who was a black soldier in Germany asking for political asylum. They submerged that story. They're kind of like letting him stay there. They're afraid to even act on his case. And then, of course, Bradley Manning, this young guy with this cherubic face, you know, it makes you proud to be involved in this movement, to see these kids today.
Well, you talk about being in the anti-war movement even 40-some years later, but definitely the scenario has changed, and we see more and more wars taking place, especially being initiated by the United States. We see military bases all over the world.
Right.
Of course, in Germany, several bases
Yes,
there.
ma'am.
And of course, as we're sitting here in Iran, we should know that we are basically surrounded by the U.S. military as we speak in different points of the Persian Gulf, and Afghanistan and Pakistan. And this is the scenario all over the world. What does it take for the anti-war movement, or those for fighting against war, to actually make a difference and have an effect on American foreign policy to try to turn this tide around?
Well, it has several different elements, you know. What I do, or what we do, is we work inside the United States military with soldiers, you know, to educate them, inform them, politicize them, you know, and to encourage them to do the right thing. That's actually pretty easy when you look at the results, you know. It is easy, and so there's certain aspects of that we don't discuss, you know. I mean, in our particular realm. Overall, one thing is key: support the troops that resist. That's key. That's a cardinal point. Then we have to raise the consciousness of the people. You know, we just can't blame the people if they don't know. We have to go out there with the information. I mean, I'm sitting here with you. You're doing a tremendous job, you know, of presenting information to the people. Your job is key, and we recognized that a long time ago, you know, because normally the press is antagonistic. Well, we work them, you know, we've worked them before, you know. But if people are, if journalists are sympathetic to what's right, you understand, we will unite with them and work with them. I've become a journalist, actually, in the realm, you know, in the context of doing my work, and didn't even know it for years, you know, because I was one of the people who had to interact with the press, and so we had to start making press statements, we had to film things, we had to get our act together, you know, and become professional in what we do, and so in doing that, you know, we provide the fabric for making this thing successful, and plus, at the very end, we're on the right side of the question.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you joining us right here at NAS TV in room 313, Mr. Darnell Stephen Summers.
From the Stop the War Brigade.
That's right.
All right.
Thank you. And thank you, viewers, for being with us. Hope you have enjoyed this part of the program as much as we have enjoyed bringing it to you. Well, I'm Marzieh Hashemi for room 313. Thank you and goodbye.